Good morning, good afternoon, every one of you, wherever you are. I hope that you are well and safe. And I don't know if you have noticed, but while some of us are mourning, while some of us are suffering, while we're all hibernating, homeschooling, while our life has changed, you can see that everything that is non-human is getting a better life, it seems. The oceans are happy, the roads are happy, the animals are happy. It seems that it's an incredible venture for them and not for us. And my key question is, will it last? Will it last? Is this a good thing for the sustainability or not in the long term? So my name is Frédéric Dalsace. I'm a professor at IMD. I've been studying sustainability issues and corporate social responsibility actions for many years. And this is what I would like to think about with you today, is to think about the long-term consequences of the COVID-19 on the sustainability. In other words, is the COVID-19 going to derail our sustainability effort? Is it going to accelerate our efforts to be more sustainable? And most importantly, probably, what can we do about it? So I've been working on it for these past weeks, trying to understand these consequences. I want to present a small framework so as to better understand what is going on. I'm going to talk about 35 to 40 minutes, and then we can have a Q&A because it's very much work in progress. Please put the Q&A, put your question in the Q&A part, not in the chat part, so that we can look at the question in a better way. By the end of this session, what I would like you to do is to have maybe to be able to project yourself better in the long term and to understand which scenario you think is more likely to come, in order maybe to have an influence on what is happening, what will be happening. I hope you will understand what is at stake now as we speak, and why it's important that now we think about the long term. And for you who are working, for those who are working in the CSR, in the corporate social responsibility, and have some responsibilities, I hope that you will better understand what are the best or most interesting long-term actions for CSR. Voila, let me start by one word of vocabulary here, so that we are on the same planet, same level playing field. Sustainability issue. I think that very simply, we as human beings, we need to make a more efficient and a more equitable use of the world resources. I'm not going to lecture very long on that, just two facts. The first is something that I like very much. It's called Earth Overshoot Day. Some of you know what it means. It's the day of the year at which humanity, all of us, we would have consumed as much resources as the year is providing us for 1 year. And you can see the results are pretty worrying, because we will be soon reaching July 2 if it continues like this, which means that we will consume twice as much resources as what the Earth can provide every year. And this is really worrying. This is for the efficient part, and for the equitable part, this is from the World Inequality Report, and you can see that there are more and more inequalities. So not only we have fewer and fewer resources per capita, but at the same time, these resources are not well distributed. So that's, for me, the sustainability issue. And then another term of vocabulary, corporate social responsibility actions. These are ways through which firms can provide some answers to the sustainability issue. I'm not saying that they will provide all the answers, but firms can and do act to provide a more efficient and a more equitable use of the resources. Voila, now that we are done, here's the key question. What will be the impact of COVID-19 on the sustainability issue? Is it going to have a positive sustainability impact, like we see nowadays with nature coming back and being very happy that we hibernate? Or is it going to have a negative sustainability impact? It's going to derail our efforts? This is the question I'm obsessed with, to be honest. And I'm trying to make a difference between the initial effect, the one that we are living now, the rebound effect that will come, and the long-term effect, and I'm most interested in the long-term effect. The initial effect, you know, it's pretty clear that it's a positive effect, as I said. You have seen the pictures of the satellite pictures of Wuhan. You have seen the CO2, NO2 emission charts, and it's really great news. And we're about here, if you ask me, because I've seen yesterday the new pictures of Wuhan, and now the CO2 and NO2 emissions are going up again, because it's the end of confinement in Wuhan. Now, what will happen next? Most probably, what will happen next? Is this rebound effect. As individuals, the firms, the government will want to be over with the COVID, and there will be a negative sustainability impact. That's most likely. What I'm interested in is not the initial effect, not the rebound effect, but the long-term effect. What will it be? Will it be like this? Like over many years, it will not have made a difference. Maybe, I don't know. Will it be like this? Like good news for the sustainability issue, and in the end, we'll say, well, there was something that was serving a purpose. Or will it be like this? Will it be, oh, it was a disaster because it put us even further apart from being more sustainable? And that's what I want to discuss with you today. Now, I've come up with a possible framework to try to understand what is going on. This is very speculative. I'm just trying to make sense of what is going on. What is sure is I want to go beyond wishful thinking, because I've witnessed that there is a lot of recycling of one's prior ideas that is taking place right now. As we speak, the sovereignists, they say, well, it says we want to close the borders. The ecologists, they say, well, it says that we really need to have a very different life. The Keynesians say, well, this is a time to have big government, etc., etc. But we need to think about what is going to happen really. So beyond wishful thinking. Some caveats, many caveats. First of all, you will see that in my scenario analysis, I'm going to use two variables. I know this is overly simplistic, and I do apologize for that. Hopefully, my variables are important, but yes. Second, it's not black and white. I'm going to try to do 4 scenarios, but it's more interesting maybe to think about the center of gravity. And third, but certainly not least, you will see that because of the choice of my variables, it's not going to be the same impact in every country. So probably the COVID-19 will not have the same consequences on long-term sustainability in every country. This said, let's start now. Here is my framework. You start with the COVID-19 crisis objective characteristics. But beyond that, you know, the lengths, number of dead people, etc., etc. But beyond that, I think what is more interesting to look at is the dominant narrative when the peak of the crisis is over. How will we speak about it? How will we reflect about it? How it will crystallize in the community? What is it that we are living through? And I think this is more important maybe than the objective characteristics. Both the objective characteristic and the narrative will have an influence on our motivation to change, the intensity of this motivation and the valence, negative or positive, and you will see what I mean here. And then this will create in turn possible post-COVID-19 scenario. And again, this scenario will have an impact on the sustainability issue. So if you agree with me, what I think is very important to look at is the dominant narrative when the peak of the crisis is over. What will be talking about? How will it crystallize? I think there are 2 key questions that may determine this narrative. The first one is the following. How will we collectively consider what we're living through? Is it going to be a one of a kind, one-off? It was a disaster, it was a recession, it was a crisis, it was a war, or is it going to be one of many? It's a wake-up call. It's not a war, it's a battle. It's a full-scale test. It's a foretaste. The two are very different in my mind. Of course, you have a continuum from one of a kind to one of many. But if it's one of a kind, then it will say that we will think, well, the worst part is behind us. Let's go back to before because, well, we did it. It reminds me of the roaring 20s, as we say in French, les années folles, the crazy years where France had won World War II and we wanted to have it over. We wanted to enjoy life as much as possible, not to think about anything else. This says that there will be a lower motivation to change for us. Or is it one of many? One of many, which means that, well, this may only be the start. After COVID-19, well, what will come? COVID-25, COVID-32? So if we think it's one of many, we will have collectively a new understanding of the risks. Like in a way, what changed in Japan after March 2011 with the tsunami, they had a new understanding that maybe the policies that they had and the measures that they took were not enough. So we have then a higher motivation to change. So again, first key question, how will we collectively consider what we have been living through? The second question will be about our collective feelings vis-à-vis our institutions and governing bodies. And here is the question. How are we going to have a positive attitude vis-à-vis our institutions and our governing bodies? Are we going to show gratitude vis-à-vis these institutions and governing bodies? Joy, relief? Or is it going to be negative? Are we going to have acrimony, dismay, grief? Again, there will be, of course, a continuum from positive to negative. If it's positive, they'll say, well, our institutions, our governing bodies, they have enabled us to go through the crisis. Solidarity triumphed. It's like Liberation Day. Liberation Day, the transition governments in France, for example, became a full power because they enable us to go through the crisis. It will be strengthening the institutions. Or is it going to be negative? Is the dominant thinking, the collective thinking will be, this should not have happened this way. It's like every man for himself, like the Titanic disaster, and with a big questioning of the institutions. And I took the example of the Titanic because after the Titanic disaster, for 2 years, you had a big change in the rule of the sea, what should be done, what are the new measures that needs to be taken to make sure it does not happen again. Voila. I like at this stage, I like to pause and I like to use the poll to see where you feel in your own country about these two different variables. And Vincent, if you could start with, poll 2, to see whether you feel that it's rather one of a kind, one of many, or whether it's positive or negative. Why don't you try to have a poll and we'll see how you think that the narrative is going to be. Here are the results. So you are on the first dimension, almost 3/4 think that it's one of many, that what we're seeing here is just a battle, but still like almost 30% think it's a war, it's one of a kind. So this is pretty clear here. It's not so clear on the second dimension. Most of you are positive, think that the feeling vis-a-vis the institution is going to be positive, and you have 1/3 that thinks it's negative. Okay, keep this in mind, and please remember what you said. Remember what you answered, and of course I ask you to answer black and white, positive or negative, one of a kind, one of many. And I do apologize for that because I know it's not the way the world is running, but still keep this for yourself, and we're going to see how you feel about the scenario that in fact you are creating by having this narrative about the COVID-19. Here we have the fourth scenario for the long term. You recognize the two variables, no surprise here. In the line, so we have the dominant thinking about the COVID-19, one of a kind, one of many to come. And then in terms of column, you have the first column, which is the positive mindset vis-a-vis the institution, and then the negative mindset vis-a-vis the institution. And here we can have four very, very different scenarios. So let's look at them one by one and think about what it means for what the COVID will be and how likely we are to change and what are the consequences for the long-term sustainability. Here we are. We're going to start here, one of a kind, and a positive mindset vis-a-vis the institution. I call this scenario no change. No change or, okay, little change. A lot of cheap talk, but no change. The narrative will be the following, the dominant narrative. COVID-19 was a one-of-a-kind crisis that for the part was adequately managed, okay? Not much motivation to change and a lot of positive, so the positive mindset, it was done well, okay? So the thrust will be like individuals, firms, governments, we want to go back to pre-COVID times as quickly as possible. Of course, there are many consequences in terms of debts, in terms of not hitting the targets that you had pre-COVID. Of course, there will be a lot of talking about, okay, this is what we will do. We will make sure that we will change everything. But this is likely to be a lot of cheap talk. And if you want the best analogy, think about what happened after the Great Recession. You remember the Occupy Wall Street, you remember the 1%, and you remember all the opinion leaders saying we need to change the system, etc., etc. Now, if you look at every single macroeconomic indicator, nothing has changed. So I think that this can be possible if it's one of a kind with a positive mindset. The consequences for the sustainability issue are pretty bad, in fact, because this says that the sustainability issue will become less of a priority as before. Why? Because individuals, firms, governments, they will want to go back to pre-COVID, to hit their target, to go back to where they were, to erase their debts or to find a way to finance their debts. And therefore, the sustainability, we need to survive today, tomorrow, in 3 months, in 1 year. And what happened with sustainability, well, we'll see if we're still alive. So this consequence in this scenario is bad for sustainability. If this happens, this is what is going to likely to happen, a negative long-term effect for the planet of the COVID-19. Okay, let's look now at scenario number 2. So scenario number 1, probably you were only 1/4 to look at the one of a kind, 2/3 as positive. So it's, it's a decent scenario among yourselves, okay? Now, let's look at this number 2 scenario, which says that it's one of a kind, but negative mindset. This is the less likely scenario if the poll is indicative of anything. I call this bigger government or the end of small government. The very famous, the state is the problem. Well, this may be the end of small government. Why? This will be how the narrative will be. COVID-19 was one-of-a-kind crisis that requires remedial action in terms of public policy. So despite the fact that, yeah, we understand this was exceptional, but still, now we need to do something about it. The thrust will be that progressive opinions for institutions, national, international, will prevail over free market capitalism that has been going on for the last 20, 30 years. So we need more state. We need a stronger health policy. We need a stronger local supply chain. And we need to do a lot of things to remediate what happened because that was not well managed and we want things to change. So far, so good. Now, what will be the consequence of sustainability? Well, social and environmental issues will create greater prominence because it will be up to the institutions to provide a better environment and to make sure that the social inequalities are not as great as they were, but only when budget allows it. And this is an issue because, of course, yes, bigger governments means bigger taxes for individuals, for firms, and of course, when you have some arbitrage to be done, then the money allocated to long-term sustainability is not likely to be huge in the beginning. So positive scenario, note this is the least likely to happen scenario according to you. Positive scenario, but moderately positive scenario at least for a long time. Now, what about scenario 3? Scenario 3 is one of many to come and positive mindset. Okay, I call this scenario citizens mindset shift. Now I'm going to talk about myself here. I shouldn't do that, and it's not the official opinion of anybody. If I could make a wish, I would like this scenario to happen. One of many to come. We know that COVID-25, COVID-32 may take place, but mostly we say, well, guys, you did well. The institutions, have been doing what they can, but we need to do more. We need to do more because more is cooking, more is happening. So the narrative will be that COVID-19 was a very serious wake-up call, a wake-up call that was defeated through the institutions, through individual involvement, through international collaboration. And what may be happening, I think, is that the COVID-19 will create a shock among many people. Say, look, this cannot go on. We need to question the current trajectory of the world, and it's up to me to take it further. In a positive spirit, I want the firms, I want the governments, I want the institutions to change their trajectory. So this will be pretty good news for the sustainability issue. The consumer-citizen balance will shift in favor of the citizen, unlike what has taken place the last 20, 30 years. The citizens, will be driving change. They will demand action. The NGOs will be very helpful here to demand actions vis-à-vis the firms and vis-à-vis the governments. So this is a positive scenario. The long-term effect of the COVID on sustainability is likely to be positive here. Last but not least, scenario number 4, one of many to come and negative mindset. I call this scenario authoritarian changes. Why? Well, what's going to happen? COVID-19 was a red flag showing that liberal democracies are not well equipped, well prepared to face these issues, and these issues are likely to come back. So the thrust will be, well, guys, we are ready to trade in freedom, health. We are ready to trade freedom for more security, for more safety. And then some authoritarian regimes, they will seize this opportunity to use technology and reduce individual liberties. We have seen already in some countries a glimpse of that. In some countries, they use the technology. Big tech will be very useful here to increase the security of the safety, make sure to curb the spread of the pandemic. However, this will lead to the cost of our individual freedoms. Consequence for the sustainability issue? Well, it depends. It depends. I'm really very skeptical about this because it will depend on the priority given to each regime. We have seen something very interesting in China. You had the rebound after the Great Recession. A lot of investment in China took place. As a result, in 2012, 2013, we had what has been called the air apocalypse. And then China, which I think can be qualified as an authoritarian regime, decided that the fight against pollution was going to be a very, very important priority. And they did work very, very efficiently on how to on curbing these emissions. So in a way, it could be positive only if the regime will take it as a priority, which is not the case in other countries such as Brazil, such as Hungary, etc., etc. So it depends. Here, I'm sorry, guys, but I'm kind of clueless of what might happen. Well, I see that all of you have commented. Many of you have commented on the scenario 1, 2, 3, 4, which I like very much. Now, this is the recap. And now you have no change, bigger government, citizen mindset shift, and authoritarian change. Now, without looking at your first poll, I'd like to ask you now, which one do you think is most likely? So we're going to have another poll, and you'll have a chance to say 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, which I'm constraining the choice, okay? So let's do that. Let's have a poll. And then what you can do is to compare what you have indicated as a scenario while you answer to the first poll with the scenario that you called for, in fact, as being the more credible. Let's have it. So you're being quite consistent, because the winner is a citizen mindset shift, 48%, almost half of you. Number 2 will be authoritarian changes, 30% almost. And then we have bigger government, 15%, and no change, 10%. Okay, very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for doing that. This is very interesting. Now, let's get away from the poll, because this is now, okay, so what? This raises a series of questions. I'm going to go for questions, and then I will take questions. But these are the questions that I am asking myself if I see that. The first one is, can the world afford scenario 1? This is the least likely scenario in your polling, so I love that. Can we afford to delay action toward more sustainability? I don't know. This is a really, really bad scenario to me. Second thing is, comparing 2 and 3 is quite interesting, because these are the 2 positive scenarios. But in a way, number 2 says that change is going to come from above, mostly. And number 3 says change is more likely to come from below. And the way they are located is kind of interesting, because it says it's going to be either one of those scenarios. So either it will be changed through the people, by the people, or it's going to be changed by the government and through the governments. Again, I don't know what will happen. I prefer personally number 3, as I told you before. Now, what about number 4? This is a scary one, to be honest, because we are trading freedom for safety, for health. And what will be our reaction if we witness the further development of authoritarian regimes? This is a key question that is very, very scary, I think. Now, what can we do about what is going on, right? These are 4 scenarios. So what can we do? Can we influence the narrative as individuals? I think we can. I think each of us, we can influence the narrative. The way I think we could influence the narrative, depending on your country again, would be, well, from one of a kind to one of many, and to make sure that we realize that we share the fact that, yes, this is COVID-19, as in 2019, but you know what? COVID-25 and COVID-32 may take place, will take place. So we need to change the mindset here. And then many we could change. If you agree, many we could try to change from acrimony to gratitude. Or we could do the following. We could say, well, we could start with one, in your country, with one variable. You say, look, this government really sucks. Excuse my French here. It was really, they were below par. So negative mindset it is. So if it's a negative mindset, then maybe it's better to think that, well, you know, it's one of a kind. Bigger government, not authoritarian changes. Or maybe you think, well, you know what? Our government did well, but we need to make sure that we are doing to change things. So making sure that we promote the idea, all of us, each of us, that we promote the idea that it can be one of many to come. That's one thing that we can do. That's one thing we can do as individuals. And the third type of questions that I have from this scenario is, how can your firms, how can firms prep for their long-term scenario? How can the CSR strategy of the firm take into account what is going to happen? And I like to show a couple of things, and then I shut up. I'm looking at the watch. I'm doing fine. I will be done in 5 minutes. So how can firms prep for what is going on? And how can you, if you work in firms, influence the corporate social responsibility of your firm? You know it. In the short term, which is not what I'm interested in, many firms are contributing to the war against the COVID-19, and this is great. I've seen a lot of things happening. I'm not going to talk very much about it, but look at the production of equipment, masks, sanitizers, ventilators. They are working alone or in corporation. This is pretty impressive. Acts of solidarity and philanthropy. giving away products, services, or money. This is also very impressive. Changing the HR solidarity measures for the people working in the companies in terms of money, health insurance, etc., or taking protective measures vis-a-vis the supply chain, the suppliers, the small suppliers, etc. I think that a lot of companies are doing something in the short term. But what about the medium term and the long term? If you think about it, in the medium term, I think that firms need to recheck their social/environmental balance. Remember, environmental is a more efficient use of resources, and social is a more equitable use of resources. COVID-19 will probably rebalance the CSR efforts towards more social impact. Because this is what is at stake right now. What can we do for the people who have been most impacted by the COVID-19? What can we do for the people who don't have a job, etc., etc.? So we need to make sure that this happens. There is a blank screen, no? All is fine. I had a blank screen from, no? Blank screen. Are we good? Yeah, okay. So there will be a rebalance. And I think that the CSR strategy VPs of the firm, I think that it would be good if they think about rebalancing social and environmental measures toward more social measures in the medium term. Now, what is important is to realize that the business case, what we call the business case of CSR, is when you can, at the same time, do more for the planet, do more for the people, while making more money for the firm. This is the golden goal. The business case of social projects, well, is usually more difficult to make than the business case of environmental gains. Because what you can do, you can say, well, I'm going to develop to be more efficient in my use of energy, water, etc. Or I'm going to create a new product and service that will save energy, water to my customers. So you are doing both at the same time. You are doing well because you have saved on energy, or because you have sold more, and at the same time you have an impact on the environment. So that business case is pretty. It's easier to be made, but it's not so easy for the social projects, and these may deter in the medium term some firms from developing CSR action, and this is a red flag that I want to wave. Now, what about the long term? What about the long term? Again, let's look at the two different areas in which CSR action can take place. You have the business case, dwindling by doing good. I am going to have an impact on the planet. I'm going to have an impact on the poor people by doing things that will help me make more money, to be clear. And this is called the instrumental case. I don't do it only because I believe it's the right thing to do, but I do it and it will help me improve my profit. That's the first part. And the second part is called the normative case. I do it because this is the right thing to do. I want to contribute to well-being. My firm is an important organization in the world, and I want to bring my contribution to develop a long-term sustainable world. So here, what is interesting is if you think that one scenario is more likely to happen, then you need to prep now for a different type of CSR action. So if you go for the no change scenario, then very clearly, you will have, unfortunately, to scale down or to freeze the firm's contribution to well-being, because nothing is going to happen. And what is more likely is that firms, shareholders will demand to go back to the normal scenario, will demand the dividends. And so you will do business case and you will try to focus on the business case, and you will need more and more. If you are the CSR VP, you will need, or EVP, you need to quantify the business impact of what it is that you are doing. If we go to the second scenario, big government, then you can develop the normative case. You can say, look, we need to help develop this new world, but you should not consume too many resources, and you'd better leverage the business case to contribute to the firm results. Number three, mindset shift. Then you could go full speed ahead in showcasing your firm contribution to developing a better world. And of course, while adding to the bottom line. But here the priority will shift to the normative case. Number 4, it depends on what is being asked. Sorry, there is a typo here from firms. But in terms of business case, you'd better focus on the license to operate, making sure that your firm will keep its license to operate, will be seen by the authorities as a legit operator. And you should also build your social capital to make sure that you defend your reputation. Well, so you see, in the long term, your CSR action will depend on the scenario that is unfolding. And what I'm asking you, if you are active in the CSR world, is to try to think about it right now and to say, okay, what is my best strategy? Let me recap, and then we'll take the questions. What have we seen today? Well, I think that the long-term impact of COVID-19 on sustainability is not clear. It depends. Okay, it depends. It will depend on what happened in each country, probably because it will depend on the narrative that is being written as we speak. And this is where I want you to have the courage to think that you can influence this narrative. You and your firm, you might be able to influence this narrative. You want to push for scenario T or 2 or 3, bigger governments or citizen mindset shift. And this is what I would like you to do, to push for a narrative that I think has positive long-term consequences for the world. Then if you, if you are in charge of CSR strategies, or if you want to influence the CSR strategies of your firm, I think you should use the different narratives, the different scenario, to think ahead about your CSR strategy and your CSR action. What the little framework that I want to share with you. I want to thank you very much. Now we're going to continue this discussion. I'm sure that there are many, many questions that have been raised, and I will try to take some of them in the time that we have and try to answer. And, sometime, I might even ask back the questions to you guys, because I very well understand the limitation of what it is that I've been working on. So let me open the question. And I will look at the question that have the most likes. Question by Kurt. Thank you, Kurt, for asking this question. You have a number of likes that is quite impressive. How do you imagine the situation will impact the luxury business in general? Very interesting. Yes, you have seen what happened in Shanghai, right? Hermes store in Shanghai, the sales were like, woo! I think this is part of the rebound effect, okay? I will not take this very, very seriously. People have been confined, people have been deprived of what they consider what their wants are, not what their needs, maybe their needs. So after a while of being deprived, this is part of the rebound effect. I would not be overly horrified by that. I think the luxury business will be impacted the same way as every business in the long term. What is interesting is I have been doing some work with some colleagues that I think that the luxury business industry can have a huge impact on the sustainability issue, but that's a different topic. I think they have a role to play here. And I was saying this before I came to Switzerland. So let's not be overly reacting about what is going on in Shanghai. We had these big sales, yes, but no sales for many days. So it's just a rebound. Now, Faisal, do you think that the corporate world will be more focused on resilience vis-a-vis efficiency? Supply chain will be more localized and less efficient? Yeah, I think here we're talking about different time periods. I think in the short and medium term, the key will be survival and the key will be resilience. So yes, there will be a lot of re-engineering of the supply chains, and there will be some ex-post studies. How can we make the world more resilient? How can we make our supply chain more resilient? What are the contingency plans, etc.? And this is really, really important. Really important. I am a B2B prof, and I see that the buyer-seller relationship are going to maybe to change with that, but that's another topic. This is in the short and medium term. And again, what I wanted to do with you today is to go beyond that. Okay, once they have done that, what about the sustainability issue? Which is, again, to me, this is the formidable issue that we need to come to grip with as quickly as possible. We have wasted a lot of time, and I wouldn't want that the COVID-19 would be one more reason for not doing anything. Voilà. Lucia, another highly rated, very vetted question. Overall, the last natural disasters have not had a big impact in the changing of behavior, despite this being the one of many. What are your thoughts in the current situation with the current pandemic, even if perceived as one of many? Lucia, I think you nailed it. And actually, this was the start of trying to think about it. Is it going to be different this time? I had great hopes during the Great Recession about the system being changed to be more equitable, to be perfectly clear with you. And I was so disappointed, and I didn't show you the, I didn't show the charts, but everything is back to normal. Every indicator is back to before. Nothing happened. So this was the start of my thinking. Will it be like this, or will we have something that is going to grow? If something is going to grow, is it going to go from the ground up, from the citizen? This time they will demand vis-a-vis the government that something happens. So will you demand that, Lucia? Clearly. Will it be from above? And if it's from above, is it going to be in a democratic way, bigger governments? Or is it going to be a switch from bigger government to authoritarian regime? That was the start of my thinking. So is it going to take place, or is it going to be a no-change scenario? The no-change scenario is a bad scenario. In a way, it's not as scary as the number 4 scenario, authoritarian change, but it's a bad scenario. So Lucia and everybody here, if you are in, still with me now, it's because you think the tsunami issue is very important. Great, do something about it around you, in your schools, in your firms, in your local cities, etc., to make sure that this time something happens. So what do we have? The PP are critical to fight this pandemic by protecting people. They are mostly made of plastics. Do you think that public perception of plastic will change? Great question again here. Guys, I love your questions. I don't know if you have seen what happened. The plastic industry people in the US have now gone full speed ahead, lobbying to say, look, I told you, plastic is good, plastic is great. We have to go back to one-use packaging. Yes, in the short term, rebound effect. Okay. But please, I think we have to stick to what was cooking now, and more people should refrain from using one-use plastic containers, etc. I think this is really bad, and there's so many. You can search the web. So many reports showing the problem with plastic. So we need for a while to use one-use packagings. By the way, paper cups are much better than plastic cups. And let's make sure that we don't listen to the lobbyists that say that plastic is good, because the truth is, no, plastic is not good. COVID-19, Hans Henning Wenck, COVID-19 will likely lead to partial recovery in climate change system investment. What will have society, private and public sector to keep focusing on climate change, or not just pull back to what they were doing before? Again, Hans, I think your question is the question I had when I started to think about this scenario, is what will happen? What will make sure that we do more and we don't come back to what was happening before? And the two levers that I found that I think are important is one of a kind, one of many. How do we metabolize what has happened, and how do we react vis-a-vis the governments? And I think that's all I can find. Maybe you have better ideas, and I'll be very happy. By the way, here is my email address: frederic.dalsace@imd.org. Please continue this discussion. And if you have other ideas, hey, I'm here because I believe in learning. What do we have here? We have a very long one. There can be a series of crises, but not necessarily health related. Oil shock, Asia financial crisis, COVID-19, maybe war. Hearing more about review and dependence on China and supply chain, I think this is worrying with international relations set against a backdrop of trade war and nationalistic narratives. So I think a more negative outcome and less collaboration between nations, strong inward-looking nations, and more self-reliance. Okay, you got a lot of agree. This is a possible scenario, and this will be, in a way, very similar toward more authoritarian regimes. Like, you know, we don't believe in international cooperation anymore. We try to make sure that we are self-sustaining. We will create local supply chains. We will make sure that we are independent in terms of our completely health system, etc. This might be happening. This has some good sides. Again, it can have some good sides, but I am worried about our freedom. I am really worried about our freedoms. And Hariri, the guy who wrote the bestsellers that you all have read, said something that is very interesting. We may shift from over the skin surveillance to under the skin surveillance. So from people controlling where we are to people controlling how we are, like temperature, coughing, heartbeat, etc. And this is to be very worrying. There's not much more I can say at this stage, unfortunately. Okay. Dalia, in the balance between economic recovery and climate change, what will drive society, private and public sector to keep focusing on climate change and not just pull back to what they were doing before? Dalia, great question. The answer is what will drive society to that? It's you. Okay, I'll be very plain. It's you. You should drive this. You should demand it. As soon as the rebound is over, the rebound is negative, remember, you should demand, you know, say, hey, I want to go back to refillable packaging. I want to make sure that you are working on CSR action, all the firms in the world, to make sure that we make a more sustainable use of our resources. And please don't forget the social issue. This is so important. We have curbed extreme poverty, but inequalities have grown. So we need to finish the job with extreme poverty and make sure that inequalities are not growing the way they are growing. Just to give you one figure, it's Oxfam together with the Credit Suisse, and Credit Suisse is not a communist party from what I understand. And they each year they publish a number of billionaires that are needed to equate half of the population wealth. Well, I'm following these numbers from year to year. I've been following that for more than a decade. And we started at more than 300. And little by little, this number went down. And now it's like 28 people. Like 28 people, 28 billionaires, they own more than half of the world. And what's next? You know, from 300 or more than that to 28 to 10 to 1? To 1? I think this is a very, very important question. And I think that we have to be more than consumers. And this is a prof of marketing who is talking about, that is talking to you now. I teach alter marketing at IMD because I think this is very important. We need to do something. So we have to demand things here. So it's us. That's all I can say here. Sorry to be melodramatic here. Interestingly enough, it will be likely that the fourth scenario will all happen at one time in different states and regions. Great point. And then what? Right? No change, citizen mindset will change, bigger government, authoritarian change. So this is a fantastic insight. So it says that the world will be more apart than what it is right now, which by itself is a scary thought. So it will be not like we're all in this together. We have one planet. This is the common good. It will be, well, in Brazil, we're good. We have enough resources. And well, in Europe, we're going to do our own way. And in China, we're going to do something else. In Israel, we're going to do, again, something else. And in the US, well, who knows? Some guy can even get reelected. So yes, this is scary because it says that we may see a greater fragmentation of the world. And that's a very, very fair point to make. Sébastien, corporates, another 6 minutes. Corporate have global strategies while the narrative are likely to be very local and government specific given all the different government action. How to bridge this gap? Sébastien, again, a very, very good point. Yes, this is the big fight, big competition that is taking place as we speak between the governments, the states, with their laws and the multinational companies. And when I teach here at IMD and elsewhere, when you compare something that you should not do, but when you compare GDPs with turnover, which is a stupid thing to do, you know, don't do that if you want to in an admission test or whatever. But nevertheless, you know, when you compare the GDPs of the states and when you compare the turnovers of the firms and when you look at the evolution over time, I think this one is fair, look at the evolution over time, you see that it's incredible how companies like Walmart, you know, $500 billion in sales. Walmart has had an impact on the most important macroeconomic indicator of the most powerful country in the world. Walmart decreased the US inflation by 0.15 or 0.2% per year for 20 years. So you have private companies now that can have an influence on not a small state, on the US, and Amazon is right now having the same impact, curbing inflation. When you see this, you say, oh, what is going to happen? And I think at least what we should do, and this is again what we're trying to do here at IMD, is to, okay, how we can change that? How can we not change that, but let me retract myself. How can we make sure that the people who have responsibility in the firms are aware of that and take all their responsibilities? With power comes responsibilities. And this has been always the same throughout history. You know, it used to be the most important type of organization used to be the religious powers. You know, you would go in Paris and the most important building was the Notre Dame. And this says something about the power of a religion. Well, they were having a lot of work on the poor people. And if you look at all the religions, they had a big corpus that was dealing with the poor people. In fact, Islam invented the social security system in the 7th century. And then it shifted, or there was another layer, and this other layer was the public, the welfare state. And the biggest building, the highest building in Paris was not Notre Dame, but the Hôtel de Ville. And you had the welfare state. And again, what is interesting is that they did a lot to curb the fate of poor people. Now, in each time, religious power, and political power, they had the responsibility to do something, and they had something to gain in doing it. The religions, they would have a lot of followers. The public states, the parties, they would have a lot of voters. Now is the time to switch to the economic power, the firms. If you go to Paris now, the highest buildings are, of course, in La Défense, where you have all the skyscrapers. And also it says something about the power of the firms. And now what is important to realize is with power comes responsibility, yes, and they may well get something out of it, more consumers. And this is the business case of CSR that is so important, and which I've been doing some research on. Long answer to that. I do apologize for that. Listen, guys, I think we are now out of time. I just want to thank you. I like very much the way you played along with me with the polls. I like the quality of the questions. So please interact with me on my email. That would be very nice. And remember what I said. Maybe I think this is maybe here. You or your firm, you may be able to influence this narrative. So push for scenario 2, push for scenario 3. And most importantly, in the short term, be well and safe, and follow, please, the social distancing guidelines. Thank you very much, and hope that we will interact in the future together. Thank you very much. Bye-bye now.